of this control, this fixed exchange rate has been fixed at 196 almost now for months. Fixed CBN monetary policy rate, fix this, then control this, have a list of bands of ineligible for foreign exchange. We'll get this, and we'll get into a lot of things seem to be modeling up. But we are putting them in a new regime of allowing even there's some basis of capital flows still going on, and it's a mishmash of some of these policy things that are now causing the economy to go down. And I show examples of some of these snippets of the old ones resisting, the old policy regime. I hear, read in the paper, oh my resource state in Nigeria Airways, say government again. Please. Subsidy, should we, shouldn't we? There's this ambivalence. And I think if President Buhari, with the moral authority that he has, with the legitimacy that brought him to power, doesn't deal with the issue of subsidy now, I don't know when and who can ever do it in Nigeria. The fundamental case against subsidy removal is not economic. It is the fact that the citizens do not trust the government to optimize on the use of the resources derivable from that. The state where I come from, I hear largely people are buying fuel now at 150 naira. Yesterday as I was coming and we got to stop somewhere, we were almost in some place looking for fuel around here. And we finally had to go and buy the ones in jerrycan that we paid over 200 a liter and so on. It's a dead weight loss to everybody. Economically speaking, it is waste. And what we call on the government is to come up with a credible agenda for that particular sector. And let's debate this issue again. I think the time to have done it, it should have been done like yesterday. The refineries, privatizing them or government trying to do them. I think we should have reached a stage in our history now that we can almost have a slogan that government in business is bad business. In Nigeria, we ought to have gotten to that stage. Government in business is bad business. At least from our own experience. It's not ideological. TSA, the Treasury Single Account. Great idea, we commend the President. But I think we can deploy it better. It could be done much better. It solves a lot of problems, at least from a point of view. We punish these guys who are taking this, who are putting these accounts. Take out the money from there and let them. For an economy in urgent need of refueling, it's not very sound economics to pile up all the idle cash and concentrate them at the central bank. There is a better way to do it. You can deploy what I call a hub and spoke strategy. A hub and spoke where the central bank remains the hub, but the banks remain the spoke. That way the liquidity that you have in this is still in the circular flow of the economy. You don't have to pile all of them and block it up and then, yeah, you've dealt with them. Fair enough. People have a proverb that you don't set your house ablaze because of the irritation of the rat in the house. This rat is giving you a hell, and then let me so deal with it. You set everywhere, let it punish it. Very. The final point I see is some of these signs of the old still battling. Is this issue of the announcement made a few months ago, that twice in 3 months we had this announcement about the presidency direct central bank to do this. A lot of players in the economy giggle hearing and reading those kinds of statements. And it's still reminiscent of the command and control thing. You see, everybody knows, despite what you said, the autonomy, independence, or whatever thing of central bank, no central bank cannot do much without the support and active collaboration with the presidency. That's the fact. When the leadership, you can stay there longer than they want you to stay there. But we're now running a market economy framework. The market will be sensitive to that kind of perception. If it is perceived that the central bank is but an arm of the political wing, then your monetary policy committee meetings mean nothing. Because we know you simply get instructions and directives on what to do. Everybody knows, even INEC and so on, that you can't exist, you can't survive without working in direct, almost indirect supervision with the presidency. But nobody wants to hear that the president directs INEC on how to conduct the election in the other place. These are some of the nuances, and the APC, fortunately in its manifesto, promised to ensure independence of the central bank. And we urge them to please do so. The final point, aspect of this, the old, return to the old, is the debate that has been going on so far now in Nigeria about the exchange rate regime. The unfortunate thing, and I want to say this, and I will elaborate on this in a few minutes. The debate is still reminiscent of the kind of debate in the 1970s. Still largely polemical thing about neoliberals and the neo-socialists and the this and that. Much of the debate lacking in evidence, lacking in theory, lacking even in counterfactual analysis. And let me state my position on this. I think the debate has been a wrong debate. It's a wrong debate, and it's the wrong language to discuss it. And I will show that in a couple of days. But the more worrisome thing to me is that it's the policy. I describe it as a policy regime rather than issue about exchange rate and not exchange rate. There is a policy regime. You take it as a package. You fix exchange rate as 196. You have a list of 41 items ineligible for foreign exchange. That is de facto banning them, as it were. You have all these kinds of what I call crude capital controls all over the place. The economy implodes. And why I say, I will tell you why I think is the wrong debate and the wrong language. At first, I actually thought that these policies were supposed to be the usual kind of short-run, usual panicky response of policymakers to a sudden shock. But as you begin to hear the language, we will devaluate now, we will not devalue. My fear is that interest groups have begun to organize to make this particular, what was supposed to be a temporary thing, to become permanent. And the economy is the one that pays dearly for it. And the way it is being communicated as directive from above is also not helpful. Let me share with you, I can write a book on this subject of the exchange rate, because it's not just from theory, we have done it before. And there is something we can be unlearning. There's accumulated knowledge to go from. But let me make a few points. The first point I make is that the issue is not, the central issue here, the first point is how a small open market economy will respond to terms of trade shock, and not the trivial debate on devalue or not to devalue. The issue has been trivialized, in my view, as to devalue or not to devalue. As I said, much of what I read lacks in evidence or even a sound theoretical basis for a small open economy. And I put, in the Nigeria's case, I read out what I put here. I said, in the specific case of Nigeria, currently buffeted by attempts of ameliorate the effects of the shocks. Terms of trade shock. That is what we are facing, a classic one. And how you respond to terms of trade shock depends on whether the shock is from the monetary nominal shock or whether it's from the real side or terms of trade or real side shock. And I will say on this, macroeconomic theory and evidence around the world are pretty much unambiguous. And I will state what this is. Relatively unambiguous. That faced with a terms of trade shock, countries with flexible exchange rate regime adjust faster and adjust better with less negative impact on growth and unemployment than those with fixed exchange rate. This is the global evidence. Pretty much largely unambiguous. We are facing a terms of trade shock. I want to put it differently. There are countries that allow relative prices, including exchange rate, to become the key adjusters when faced with a terms of trade shock, have almost always done better than those that resorted to price or exchange rate fixing and the distorting controls. Go and check out the list of countries that have fixed exchange rate in the world, and you'll see why people have moved out from that kind of regime, even under a shock. The second point that I make, and I want to put this in a very interesting bit before I wrap up this. In theory, if you don't allow prices to adjust, quantities will adjust. And the quantities that will adjust are output and employment. Basic. That's what theory says will happen. That's the experience we have had in Nigeria over years. And that is what is happening today. Output and employment are adjusting with vengeance. Second, my thesis is that from Nigeria's own evidence from our own history, that the current policy regime is inconsistent with the objectives of creating jobs, growing income, and reducing poverty. Nigeria, since 1973, can become a laboratory. Since 1973, we have had episodes of positive and negative oil price shocks. If you divide the episodes of positive oil price shock and episodes of negative price shock, and then you also match them with the responses of policy regimes. I talk about policy regimes of fixed price, fixed exchange rate with draconian controls versus a flexible regime, flexible exchange rate and letting things without the draconian controls. The evidence is that in all cases, both under a positive oil price shock and negative oil price shock, fixed exchange rate which control this kind of capital and so on, bans and this and that, the economy has always done worse under that regime than under a flexible regime. We had a thing in 2000, even in 2008, 2009, the world went through unprecedented, unexpected global crisis. Global liquidity froze. Capital were flying out of developing countries, including Nigeria and so on and so forth. We allowed these prices to adjust. We took a hit. I could have, if I wanted to play a populist one at that time, decided I had a few months to live, and I had a war chest of about $54 billion in foreign reserves. We grew it to 62 from 10 billion that I met it. We could have played populist or fixing it, fix it there and use reserve then and use controls to defend it. Then when I leave, then the lead would let open and people would say, if it was when Soludo was there, the thing was 115, 117, and so on. But I knew the economy was going to pay dearly for it. And we took the unpopular one of allowing the rate to adjusted frequently. And what was the outcome? The economy still, when the world was in the Great Recession, the Nigerian economy still grew by over 6%. Employment was preserved. We were not paying salaries and states and so on and so forth. We'll take these things for granted. But these are laboratory experiments. We have gone through this before. Second is that during that regime, we also tried some of these microcontrols, initially out of panic because it was a sudden shock from the rest of the world. But we quickly also realized they were doing more harm than good, and we decided to dismantle them. So we now have evidence as to what works and what doesn't work. We can't be going back. The third, I make a point that the current economic hardship is largely our choice and not just oil price shock. The slump in the economy, in my view, was predictable and avoidable. We are now happening, as it happened in the 81 to 85 period, the economy is on a tailspin. And I believe we have more about a 4% growth shortfall now in terms of what we need to explain. And fall in oil price cannot fully explain the 4% growth shortfall.